Oh my god, guys. Hi, it's Phoebe from Who's Phoebe, and welcome back to another Doctor Who video, and this is my review on The Legend of Ruby Sunday. As you can tell from my face, I enjoyed it, but it was also very shocking. So let's do the review. So first, the Doctor comes swinging into unit, you know, like normal. He's very excited because he wants to find out who Ruby is. So this is where this series has been leading to, discovering who Ruby is, and this is the first of the two-part final, and I'm very excited for next week. But first, let's concentrate on this week. So this episode was intense and it was scary. I knew there was going to be some kind of god returning in this episode because the Toymaker said in the 60th there's going to be a lot of references to the 60th anniversary special here, because I feel like this is relevant in this particular story. So there's a lot of so the Toymaker said to the 14th Doctor that there was one god he didn't dare challenge, which I think is very interesting. Also, spoilers alert in this review. I'm sorry, but I can't do this review without spoilers in this. So I was like, when I first watched The Giggle, I was like kind of trying to debate how many different gods there are out there, and then I realised there's quite a list in Doctor Who. There's Sutekh, that's not the only time that name's going to come up. And then there's also the Mara as well, but that was a different thing, that was a snake-like god. But there's loads of different gods in Doctor Who. The Maestro, and that kind of thing. So it was very interesting that this episode kind of touched on those gods a bit, and the time window was an interesting element in this episode. I thoroughly enjoyed that, mostly because it felt like kind of Doctor Who, but like also kind of Kate saying, "Doctor, you've told us not to touch the time window in the 1970s." I feel like that was an excellent kind of comment, really, for obviously Doctor Who to make. Not only because of the way it makes sense in this episode, but it also kind of confirms what the Doctor has already known about the unit time window. Like, he wants to keep it because it's dangerous technology. And Triad has been an anagram of the TARDIS for some time. I obviously knew the second that we saw images of the promo images for this episode on BBC Doctor Who, where it said Triad technology, I already knew that Triad was an anagram of TARDIS. I mean, so yeah, I feel like I already knew that was the anagram anyway they were using, and it's not the first time anagrams have been used in Doctor Who, because Torchwood is an anagram for Doctor Who. So I feel like Triad was literally, if you're clever enough, you can work this out type anagram, but if you hadn't, then anagram is already then Triad is an anagram for TARDIS, as they mention in the episode frequently. I feel like that was the bit I didn't really like. I knew already, like, when they mentioned that Triad was an anagram for TARDIS, I felt like that's a nice bit of information, but the fact they kept on saying it kind of annoyed me a bit. Like, I'm like, yeah, we get it. It's an anagram for TARDIS, just leave it at that. So I felt like it was very, very sort of interesting to have this sort of thing. And the Doctor also kind of, unit were already aware of this woman following the Doctor and Ruby around, so I felt that was very interesting as well, but we hadn't made the link until now. The Doctor was starting to piece puzzles together. She was an ambulance. There's a couple of little mentions of other places that the Doctor and Ruby have seen her. The snow around Ruby as well. So this episode focuses on Ruby quite a bit. So this is really her episode to really sort of like discover who she is and who her mother is. The fact that what I was surprised, after the whole thing broke out of the time window, after this storm broke out the time window, the TARDIS was on the church on Ruby Road twice. Now I'm going to explain this because I feel like this needs an explanation, but not only that, it's It's more the fact I feel like people won't be aware of what this episode, of what this is trying to say. So yes, the Doctor and the Christmas Special went back to the church on Ruby Road with the goblins to save baby Ruby. But then of course there was the same TARDIS in the same place with this storm around it. Now I felt that was very interesting because for the first moment I thought, surely this has got to be connected to the Doctor in a way, but then it turns out it's not, and I am revealing spoilers here. And this is interesting because the TARDIS can't be in two places at the same time. So when they kind of revealed that on the WHS tape, I thought it's a weird circumstance, but not only that, it seems to me like someone's been messing with the history, because this woman keeps pointing to the Doctor, as we saw in the time window, which is very, very interesting to know. And it keeps snowing around Ruby. And Carla was there, and Rose, Donna's daughter, was there as well. So I feel like a lot of this ties into around Ruby's general birth and who she is. Because when they did the scan on Susan Triad, as her name is, but it's the wrong anagram, and I'll get to that in a minute, I feel like it said that she was human. She's obviously not, because I knew that, like, the Doctor thinks initially this Susan is his granddaughter, you know, and I thought, oh yeah, that wouldn't be so bad to have the Doctor and Susan reunited again. But then to me things didn't quite add up, because I feel like Susan would have Carol Anne's forward face, so things to me didn't really add up in that sense to who Susan Triad actually was. And then we had Harriet Arbinger, which I thought, hang on a sec, we've had the Maestro's son, Harbinger, so I knew something was going to happen here. Although I did like the reveal, it was really, really cool. I did love the general reveal they did for that. So yeah, I just thought it was interesting to sort of see that in Doctor Who, the way they've used these gods that we've had in this series so far as a new way of trying to reveal who this actual god is. And I was beginning to wonder who it was, because I know people had theories, but I think my favourite theory was the fact it was Sutekh returning. And I will admit, I'm so glad that theory is true, because the general reveal was absolutely amazing. When they scanned the TARDIS, it turns out when the Doctor thought Sutekh in the classic series with Tom Baker in The Periods of Mars in 1976, it felt like somehow when Sutekh was destroyed, he would come back, and it turns out his essence is in the TARDIS, which is very, very intriguing to me, because the TARDIS this has never happened before. The TARDIS has never sort of groaned before, and it did groan in Rogue as well. So this is a very interesting way to go about revealing the reveal of Sutekh. I absolutely loved this reveal. It was definitely sort of a shock to me. I was literally on the edge of my seat with that reveal. It was probably the coolest reveal I've ever seen in Doctor Who when it comes to classic monsters. I'm also not surprised that Russell T Davies went down this route, and also it makes a lot of sense what the Toymaker said in the 60th anniversary specials, the giggle, you know, saying there was one god he didn't want to fight, Sutekh of all gods. Also, I'm going to give a couple of mentions here to a couple of the other things that were mentioned in this episode, like the Mara. That also gets another really, that's a good name drop. I like that, because before they get to Sutekh, they literally name the Mara, which makes me wonder at some point if the Mara is going to return in Doctor Who, because I feel like they wouldn't have mentioned it if it's not going to return at any point. So I feel like maybe the Mara is going to return at some point. I don't know, I just feel like I feel like with this mention, Damara has to return in some form or other, I don't care. But I really did like them name dropping a couple of the old gods. Like, I loved how Harriet was possessed, and this was all kind of revealed in a weird way as well. And I can't help think that maybe Sutekh is a link to Ruby's birth in a way as well. So to me, this felt very kind of interesting in a good way, because Sutekh was back there, and it's going to be interesting for next week when we see everything revealed next week properly, like all the answers that we're going to get. But I have high hopes for this. I have high hopes for next week after seeing this. But not only that, I liked the reveal of Sutekh. I mean, it was a bit like the Doctor is a bit slow in kind of picking up the anagrams straight away. Sutekh, like, literally, I kind of already worked out the Sutekh part, like the Sutekh. So Sutekh, I liked the anagram. That was such a cool anagram in there. So I liked the reveal. I liked how slowly we got to that reveal at the end, and it didn't feel rushed. It felt like, because you've had the whole 40 minutes of this episode to sort of have that reveal, it felt perfect to reveal it kind of towards the end in a way, because it felt right to do it like that. And not only that, this reveal made perfect sense really to do it like that. I love how they've decided to bring Sutekh back into the modern world of Doctor Who, because I've always wanted a god to return. But I will admit, Russell T Davies has a way with classic villains, and I love how he's brought back Sutekh in a weird kind of very scary way. This was a scary reveal for me, and I must admit, this worked really well. It now explains who Susan Twist is. She's been slowly kind of following the Doctor to this moment on the unit bridge, to basically reveal herself, who she actually is. The CGI of Sutekh coming out the TARDIS is also one of my favourite things about this reveal as well, because it's actually coming from the TARDIS. Sutekh is actually coming out of the TARDIS. So this was very, very kind of an interesting way of going about the reveal. Also the fact that Susan Twist literally sort of like skeleton immediately like that. I really did love that. It's scary. This is not kid stuff. This is like proper horror. This is Doctor Who for me. This is Doctor Who. Like last week, this is Doctor Who for me. This feels like Doctor Who, and this feels like Russell T Davies' Doctor Who to me. I loved it. There's not one bad thing I can say about this episode, because I feel like this was just absolutely incredible. The way it was portrayed, the way Sutekh was revealed. I mean, to be fair, I had no idea Sutekh was going to return. I knew a god of some kind was going to return, but I hadn't guessed for a minute it would be Sutekh at all. Not one thing. That's not one thing I thought about when I watched the start of the series, you know, from this, you know, up until episode 7. That is not one of the things I thought. I did not think it was going to be Sutekh. Of all the monsters Russell T Davies chose, he chose Sutekh. I'm really glad he did, because this worked well. But not only that, we are slowly starting to get answers to Ruby's birth. And I'm very much looking forward to next week's episode, where we get a bit more about who Ruby might be and who actually her mother is. Because the fact that this person pointed to the Doctor obviously kind of knew who, like, feels like the Doctor knew them in a way. Feels like the Doctor has to know. So I feel like that's interesting. And the fact that Ruby goes back down to the time vault and it snows and she's like this and then hears the voice. Excellent. Absolutely excellent. And also, props up to Scooty Gutwer and Millie Gibson for some excellent performances. Bravo, bravo. I loved them in this episode. I also really loved the vibes of this episode. Felt very, very classic Doctor Who, 1970s Doctor Who. So yeah, I loved the Sutekh reveal, and out of 10, I would give this episode a solid 10 out of 10. If I could raise it higher, I would. This was a great episode. I loved it. The reveal of Sutekh was absolutely amazing, and there is not one thing bad to say about this episode. This episode was everything I loved about Doctor Who. It was intense, it was scary. You had surprise reveals which I did not see coming. You had mentions of other gods like Maestro and the Toymaker and the Mara. You had those reveals, you had those mentions. I completely loved this episode, and I cannot wait for next week's episode, The Empire of Death, and that will be my last Series 14 review, and then after that I'll go back to reviewing the classic episodes afterwards. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you did, and make sure you click the subscribe button down below, and also click notifications bell so you get notifications every single time I upload. I am now going to upload this to YouTube. Allons-y.